From the Digital Summit at the TCF Center, welcome to your Daily Detroit for Wednesday, September 25th, 2019. I'm Jer Stays. Today, my colleague Sven Gustafson has mixed up a fun episode to serve you. Tammy Coxen and Lester Graham have been highlighting Michigan's burgeoning craft cocktail scene and growing number of distillers for more than 3 years now on Michigan Radio, the NPR affiliate. Now, they've turned their occasional Friday segment, Cheers, into a new book. It's called Cheers to Michigan, a celebration of cocktail culture and craft distillers. Coxen is well known in Ann Arbor as the host of Tammy's Tastings, a series of food and drink experiences. Graham is a broadcast journalist at Michigan Radio who hosts the Environment Report and Stateside. They join us to talk all about the new book and Michigan's boozy ride from Prohibition to the current craft cocktail boom. But first, thanks to our members on Patreon who help make this possible. You could become one of those cool folks at patreon.com/dailydetroit. And thank you.
Our guests today have a brand new book out all about cocktails. It's called Cheers to Michigan, a celebration of cocktail culture and craft distilleries. Tammy Coxen and Lester Graham, welcome to Daily Detroit.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely. So Lester Graham, of course, is the voice behind, he's a host at Michigan Radio. Tammy, you host something called Tammy's Tastings. I'll get to some of that in a minute. Congratulations on the book. As I was reading through it, it dawned on me that we're basically right in the middle of the 100-year anniversary of Michigan being in the grips of Prohibition. There wasn't much fanfare about that, but 100 years ago, tough to get a drink in this town.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Depends on if you knew somebody.
Yeah, I don't think it was very tough at all, is what we found out when we were researching the book.
Yeah. Interesting data point that you say between 60 and 75% of all booze smuggled into the United States during Prohibition came through Detroit.
Well, you had Canada, who was over there, enjoying their drinks and making a lot of extra whiskey because they had a place to sell it, the United States. And all he had to do is figure out a way to get it here. And there were lots of ways to get across the Detroit River or Lake Erie or, Lake Huron.
My favorite was the steno girls, so the stenographers that would live in Windsor and work in Detroit, and they would smuggle it over in their lunch boxes.
Oh, that's great. I love that. So Detroit really figures large into sort of the history of booze in this country, and you get into that in the book. Let's talk a little bit about the two of you. Tammy, you have a business called Tammy's Tastings in Ann Arbor. How long have you been doing that? And tell us a little bit about that business.
So I started in 2006 doing chocolate tastings and making artisan truffles. And then over the years, as my interest changed, the business changed with me. And in 2011, I started teaching cocktail classes and just hit the market at just the right time and was able to quit my day job. And now that's what I do is I lead interactive, hands-on cocktail mixing experiences, and it's great.
So I'm a former bartender myself, and I saw somewhere, I don't remember if it was in the book or, looking in researching your company and everything, but you had a class called Stirred, Not Shaken, James Bond Was Wrong.
That's right.
What's that about?
So James Bond, of course, is always
Shaken,
known
not
for
stirred.
calling for his shaken, not stirred martini. But, the rule of cocktails, which you will probably know as a former bartender, is that if a cocktail has cloudy ingredients in it, that's a cocktail you want to shake because the drink's going to be cloudy anyway. But if it only has clear ingredients, gin, vermouth, then if you stir that drink, it's just much more nice to look at. And the first thing we do when we drink a cocktail is look at it. Before you ever smell it or taste it, you want it to look nice when it's presented. And a stirred cocktail is just much more attractive. So martinis should be stirred, not shaken.
Yeah, James Bond also preferred vodka martinis, which is how I sort of discovered martinis, but nowadays I don't touch them at all. Somebody made me a proper gin martini with plenty of vermouth in it, and at that point I was like, oh, that's what a martini
Right,
is.
there are so many ways that James Bond was wrong.
Yeah.
It's one of the most contentious points in the book. People have strong feelings about martinis, and
Yes.
I always figure a martini is gin. A lot of people say, you don't put vermouth. You set the bottle by it, you wave it over it, you get it close to it, but you
I so
don't put
disagree.
any. Yeah, no, vermouth can really make a martini. I mean, it's not really, it's cold gin otherwise. And cold gin's fine if you want to have cold gin, just don't call it a martini.
Now, one of the things that I will say, though, is that the 1980s and 1990s was the dark ages for cocktails. And when, vermouth is wine, it goes bad like wine does. And so if you stored your vermouth under hot lights on the back of the bar for 6, 8 months or years, it was toxic waste and you didn't want it in your martini.
Right.
But today we have so many great vermouths, both sweet and dry, that when they're stored correctly and used properly in cocktails can just add so much interest.
Right. Lester, of course, you've been at Michigan Radio for years now. You're
21 years.
You host Stateside along with our friend Cynthia Canty, who we had on the show recently. You also host the Environment Report, where you discuss, pretty serious news, ecological issues and everything in Michigan. Why cocktails?
Well, that was the whole thing when they asked me to do the Friday show. She and I had been talking about cocktails. I've been going to Tammy's classes for cocktails, found it really fascinating as a novice, and thought, here's something that's a little fun. It's a salute to the weekend. We'll have a little cheers moment for everybody, and that should be nice. And I took it to my boss, Zoe Clark, and said, look, we want to do this. What do you think? She said, I think it's a great idea, but it has to be Michigan focused. And that really helped us out, because then we had a reason to go to all the distilleries and the bartenders and the bars and say, look, can you make up a cocktail with Michigan ingredients? And the Michigan Spirits crowd have really, really embraced that.
Sounds like a pretty grueling assignment.
It's tough. Somebody has to do it.
Right. So this is there are recipes in here and there are some sort of how-to instructions, but it's more than that, right? Like, how do you describe this book?
Right. As we said, it's not really a cocktail manual. If you want to learn how to mix drinks, there's better books for that, or come to a class. But it really is telling the story of Michigan through spirits, through the people who make the drinks. Every recipe has a story attached to it, where we really try to connect it. And then my favorite part of the book, I think, is the lengthy opening section where we sort of talk about that history of Michigan and the ways in which Michigan is now a model state for how small distillation gets done across the country.
It's really interesting. One of the things we got to do the first time, and this is before we were doing Cheers on the air, we were just both interested in distilling. And so we went over to MSU's distilling program, ran into the guys who were putting away barrels there because they didn't have their federal license yet, who now run Detroit City Distilling. And we got to know them a little bit and then went back just before they opened. And we are proud to say that we had the first drink at DCD. So we're pretty proud about that little Detroit moment of history.
That's cool. You also, the first recipes in the book are 3 cocktails that are famous to Michigan: the Last Word, the Hummer, and the Bloody Bull, right?
The Bull Shot.
Bull Shot, thank you. Tell the story about the Last Word, if you will, because I love it. I think it's so neat.
So we used to think this drink was invented during Prohibition, but then they just recently, in the last few years, found a 1916 menu from the Detroit Athletic Club that lists this drink called the Last Word. It's an equal parts cocktail: gin, green chartreuse, which is a French liqueur, maraschino liqueur, which is Italian, and then lime juice. And presumably was quite popular at the Detroit Athletic Club until Prohibition came and shut everything down. The drink sort of bounces around a little bit. Last time it appears in print historically was in like 1950 or so in a book called Bottoms Up by Ted Saucier.
And that was a book out of Detroit, right?
I think it was just a cocktail book. It was just a cocktail manual. And then it disappears, like so many drinks did in the mid-century. It's around the early 2000s when a guy named Murray Stenson out in Seattle, he's part of this new up-and-coming cocktail renaissance. People are, as I said, 80s and 90s, dark ages. So in the 2000s, bartenders start looking back at what made drinks good before Prohibition and start adopting that philosophy. And he finds this drink in this old cocktail book and starts making it. And it just takes the cocktail world by storm. And now there are a million variations on the cocktail. And it really kind of put Detroit on the map. And now Detroit's one of the hottest cocktail markets in the country. So we're kind of reclaiming that early heritage.
Yeah, it's so cool. I have to also say, as a former bartender, the Hummer, which is I think your third drink invented in Michigan, I have personal kind of relationship with that drink in the form of nightmares. I used to work on Mackinac Island for like 5 seasons. And especially during the yacht races, the sailboat races to Chicago to Mackinac and the Bayview to Mackinac, the sailors, and also, but before they got there, their wives and their families that got up there would order, like, I mean, I'm not kidding, like you'd get an order for like 15 Hummers, which just, I'm not doing anything else for the next 10 minutes. Don't bother me. I'm in the weeds, making Hummers. And they would order multiple rounds. So never been a fan of that drink. If I never have to make another one again, it's too soon,
What I think is really interesting about the Hummer is that so many people know about it and so few people know that it came from Detroit. It really did travel the whole world well before the last word did, and just nobody knew it was from here.
Yeah, a guy named Jerome Adams at Bayview Yacht Club made it. We lost him last year.
Yeah.
And I got to go out to Bayview and have one of the original Hummers. Ours is a Michigan Hummers, so it's a little different. It's not the same recipe, but I think it's darn tasty. It's
all
really
Michigan ingredients.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to put you guys on the spot here. It's late September, late summer, kind of, we're inching toward fall. You can kind of feel the change in the air a little bit, but still nice warm days. What's your go-to cocktail for this time of year? Because you've got this, all the recipes are organized sort of seasonally.
So I'm going to say right now, probably the apple business. We're starting to get that early cider in now. And the apple business is a cocktail that kind of bridges summer and fall really nicely. It's got gin, apple cider, lime juice, which we don't think about with cider. We would normally put lemon. And then it's got a honey syrup. So lots of great opportunities to use really delicious Michigan ingredients. And it works great with a lot of different Michigan gins. So the apple business.
Pretty tasty.
Lester, what's your go-to?
Well, when I think about, different season, I actually have to go up to February to Groundhog Day because she's got this hot version and a cold version of basically the same drink. And it's Go Groundhog Go and
Saw His Shadow.
Saw His Shadow. One's cold, one's hot, like a hot toddy. They're both delicious in their own way. The hot toddy has a little more fuller flavor, as you might expect a hotter drink to be. But I love both of them. So that's what I think of when I'm kind of bridging the seasons. Very cool.
So on a day like today, it's a hot toddy in the morning and then a cold one in the afternoon.
Nice. You guys have an event, kind of a book signing event, is it, at the Sugar House coming up next month?
Right, on October 14th. Should be fun. Dave Kwiatkowski and Sugar House are in the book. You cannot make this drink. We included it anyway, because it's just delicious. But there are like secret ingredients and really hard things like sarsaparilla.
And all those crazy bitters that they find.
That they make, yeah.
I'm hoping they'll revive it for us.
It'd be nice.
Yeah. These events are what we call Drink the Drink, meet the authors, buy the book. So we'll have a menu of drinks that are drawn from the book, maybe riffs that the bar is putting on them. Lester and I will be on hand to chat with people, and then the book will be available for sale and signing.
And in the meantime, the Cheers segment runs on Stateside on Michigan Radio, which is the NPR affiliate, on Fridays. Every Friday? Or?
No, every other Friday.
Or so.
We've got to get together this week, and it's terrible, but we've got to drink another cocktail to make sure that it works for the show. So
all the work for science, right? Yeah.
We're serving the people here. You know that.
That's right. The book is called Cheers to Michigan, a celebration of cocktail culture and craft distillers. It's out now on the University of Michigan Press. Tammy Coxen, Lester Graham, thanks so much for coming by.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, that's last call for today's show, friends. If you like what you're hearing and you haven't already done so, please subscribe to Daily Detroit on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favorite shows. And tell a friend about us to help spread the word. It's easy, and it's the best way to help us grow the show and keep this project going. And thanks for listening. For Sven Gustafson, I'm Jair Stays. Until next time, take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.